Michael Carter, a communications magnate, stood silently in Central Park, surrounded by the clamor of New York City. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the air filled with the scent of fallen leaves. For the world, he was the epitome of success. A wealthy businessman with his face often plastered across headlines. But beneath that polished exterior, there was a man haunted by the past. A past that revolved around one woman, Anna. 15 years had passed since she vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but lingering memories. Today, Michael found himself at the park by chance, or so he believed. His eyes were lost in the sight of children playing nearby, their laughter a cruel contrast to his inner turmoil. Just as he was about to leave, a melody caught his attention. It was soft, almost ethereal, yet hauntingly familiar. His heart skipped a beat. That song. It was Anna's song. He scanned the area quickly and spotted a young woman, no older than her early 20s, sitting on a nearby bench with a guitar. Her voice was captivating, filled with a raw emotion that sent chills down his spine. Michael couldn't move. It wasn't just the song. There was something about her voice. It wasn't an exact match, but the tone, the pain embedded within each note, was eerily similar to Anna's. He approached slowly, as if any sudden movement would break the spell. The woman looked up, her hazel eyes meeting his with a brief flicker of surprise before returning to her guitar. Michael waited until she finished the song before speaking. "Excuse me," he said, his voice unsteady. "Where did you learn that song?" The young woman looked wary, clutching the neck of her guitar a bit tighter. "It's just an old song. I've known it for as long as I can remember," she replied cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael felt a mix of hope and confusion. "I knew someone who used to sing it. It's very special to me." She seemed to soften slightly, though her guard remained up. "Well, it's special to me too," she said, her gaze drifting toward the bustling park. Michael couldn't let it end there. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I didn't mean to intrude. It's just, hearing that song after so long, it brought back a lot of memories." The woman nodded slowly, clearly uncomfortable with his intensity. "I understand. Music can do that, I guess." As Michael struggled to find the right words, she abruptly stood up. "I have to go," she said, slinging the guitar over her shoulder. "But, thank you for listening." "Wait," he called out, desperation leaking into his tone. "What's your name?" She paused, as if deciding whether or not to answer. "Olivia," she finally said. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Michael stood there, frozen. Olivia. The name didn't mean anything to him, but her voice, the voice that had awakened the ghosts of his past, did. Was it merely coincidence? Or could this mysterious young woman somehow be connected to Anna? Michael knew one thing for sure. He needed to find out more about her, no matter what it took. The song, the voice, the memories, they were all too much to ignore. As Olivia's silhouette faded into the distance, a new determination lit up Michael's eyes. It was time to chase the echoes of a song that had refused to be forgotten. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled upon something significant, perhaps even fate itself. After returning home that evening, his luxurious penthouse apartment felt emptier than usual. He poured himself a drink, his thoughts consumed by the encounter with Olivia. Who was she? Why did she know that song? And why did her voice resemble Anna's so closely? His assistant, David, a reliable man who had been with him for over a decade, noticed Michael's distraction the next morning during a meeting. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Michael, who was usually sharp and focused during discussions, was lost in thought. "I need you to find someone for me," he said abruptly, his gaze distant. David was taken aback but nodded. "Of course. Who is it?" "A young woman named Olivia. She was singing in Central Park yesterday," Michael explained, his voice filled with urgency. "I don't know much about her, but I need to know everything you can find." David nodded, making a mental note of the request. He had learned over the years not to question Michael's intentions, no matter how unusual they seemed. "I'll see what I can do," he assured. The search began immediately, but Olivia wasn't easy to trace. She seemed to exist without a substantial online presence. a rarity in a city where everyone was connected in some way. Days passed, and Michael grew increasingly restless. He returned to Central Park several times, hoping to see her again, but each visit ended in disappointment. Then, one chilly afternoon, David called him. "I found her, sir. She performs regularly at a small bar in Greenwich Village." Michael's heart raced. "Send me the address," he ordered. Later that evening, Michael entered the dimly lit bar, his senses alert. It was a small, intimate venue, filled with the quiet murmur of patrons enjoying their drinks. As he made his way to a corner table, he noticed a small stage with a lone microphone and a stool set up for the performer. Minutes later, Olivia appeared, her guitar slung over her shoulder. Her presence was unassuming, yet something about her commanded attention. She began to play, her fingers moving effortlessly across the strings. Her voice filled the room, soft but powerful, and once again, it was Anna's song that echoed in the air. Michael's chest tightened as the familiar melody washed over him. This time, he listened more intently, trying to decipher every note, every subtle inflection. There was a sadness in her voice, a sense of longing that resonated deeply with him. He was transported back to the nights he and Anna had spent together, sharing dreams and secrets. When the performance ended, Olivia gave a small, polite nod to the modest applause from the crowd. Michael watched as she began packing up her guitar, his opportunity slipping away with each passing second. He stood abruptly, weaving his way through the tables until he reached her. "Olivia," he called, his voice carrying a mix of urgency and hesitation. She turned, her expression a blend of surprise and wariness. "You again," she said, not unkindly, but with a trace of suspicion. "Yes, me again," Michael replied. "I'm sorry for approaching you like this, but I couldn't stop thinking about that song." Olivia sighed, her shoulders slightly drooping as if exhausted by the same question. "Look, it's just a song, okay? I've been singing it for as long as I can remember. Where did you learn it?" Michael pressed, his eyes searching hers for any hint of recognition. Olivia seemed to consider the question for a moment before replying. "My mother used to sing it to me when I was little. She said it was one of her favorites." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "Your mother? Did she tell you anything else about it? Anything at all?" She shook her head, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "No, not really. It's just a song, like I said." Michael wanted to scream out his frustrations, to tell her that this was more than just a song. It was a key to the past he desperately needed to unlock. But he could sense that pushing her further now would only drive her away. "Can I buy you a drink?" he asked instead, trying to ease the tension. Olivia hesitated, then shrugged. "All right, but just one." They sat at a small table near the bar, the dim light casting shadows over Michael's lined face and Olivia's youthful features. As they spoke, Michael learned bits and pieces about her life. She had grown up with her mother in Brooklyn, never knowing her father. Times had been tough, but music had always been a source of solace for her. "Do you remember much about your mother?" Michael asked carefully. Olivia's eyes clouded over. "Not really. She passed away when I was young. It's mostly just fragments now, like that song." Michael felt a pang of sympathy mixed with an overwhelming sense of urgency. Could Olivia's mother have been Anna? Was it possible that Anna had been hiding all these years, raising a daughter away from the dangers of his world? The thought was almost too much to bear, yet it seemed both implausible and tantalizingly possible. "What's your last name?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Olivia's eyes narrowed slightly, her guard going up. "Why do you want to know?" Michael struggled to find a believable answer. "I'm just curious. I want to understand the connection we seem to have. That's all." Olivia took a sip of her drink, studying Michael with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "It's Evans," she finally said. "Olivia Evans." Michael's mind raced. Evans was not a name he associated with Anna, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. People changed names, created new identities. But there was one question he needed to ask, even if it risked everything. "Did your mother ever mention someone named Michael Carter?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the noise of the bar. Olivia frowned, clearly taken aback by the question. "No, she never mentioned anyone by that name." Michael's heart sank. But he wasn't ready to give up. He needed more time, more information. As Olivia excused herself and prepared to leave, Michael made one final plea. "Olivia, please," he said, "if you ever want to talk more about the song or your mother, here's my card." She accepted it reluctantly, glancing at the name before slipping it into her bag. "I don't know what you're looking for, Mr. Carter," she said quietly, "but I hope you find it." As she walked away, Michael remained seated, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He had found Olivia, but the answers he sought were still elusive, hiding just beneath the surface. One thing was clear. This was only the beginning. In the days following his encounter with Olivia, Michael found himself more determined than ever. She wasn't just a stranger with a familiar voice. She was a living link to Anna, the woman who had defined the happiest and most painful years of his life. Michael was certain now that he needed answers, no matter how deep he had to dig. At his office, the normally busy team noticed a shift in their boss's demeanor. Michael, usually aloof but efficient, seemed distant, preoccupied with something beyond the walls of the boardroom. David, ever observant, approached him cautiously one morning. "Sir, any updates on the young woman?" he asked, hoping to understand the source of Michael's distraction. Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've met her, but I still don't know enough. There's a connection, David. I can feel it." David hesitated before asking, "How far do you want to go with this? I mean, we could dig deeper, but it might not be something she's comfortable with." Michael's eyes hardened. "I need to know who she really is, David. Do whatever it takes, but don't scare her off. Be discreet." David nodded and left the room, already making calls to private investigators and contacts in the city. Meanwhile, Michael's thoughts kept returning to Olivia's words. Her mother had sung the song to her, and Olivia had never known her father. The pieces seemed to fit together, yet there was still too much he didn't understand. That evening, Michael sat alone in his penthouse, scrolling through old photographs on his tablet. Pictures of him and Anna filled the screen. Smiling, laughing, sharing moments that seemed both a lifetime away and just yesterday. He paused on one image in particular. Anna sitting by a window, her eyes distant but filled with a quiet strength. Michael wondered if Olivia had inherited that same resilience. He closed the tablet, unable to bear the weight of the memories any longer. 2 days later, Michael's phone rang. It was David. "Sir, I have some information about Olivia," David said. His voice was low, hinting at something significant. Michael's pulse quickened. "What did you find?" "She was raised by a single mother in Brooklyn, like she said. Her mother's name was Caroline Evans, and she passed away about 5 years ago. Olivia was left on her own after that." The name Caroline Evans didn't match with any of Michael's memories. He tried to hide his disappointment. "Did you find any connection to Anna?" David hesitated. "Not directly, sir, but there's something else you should know. I found an old photo of Caroline online from a community event years ago. She bears a striking resemblance to Anna." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "Send me the photo." Moments later, the image appeared on his phone. The woman in the picture had darker hair, styled differently, and her face was aged by years of hardship, but the resemblance to Anna was undeniable. Michael's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. Caroline could have been Anna, he whispered to himself. Could she have faked her death? Could she have lived under a different name, raising Olivia alone? That night, sleep eluded Michael. His mind was plagued with questions that seemed impossible to answer. Who was Caroline Evans? Was she really Anna, living under a false identity? And if so, why had she never reached out to him? He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was close, just within reach. The following day, Michael made a decision. He would approach Olivia again, this time more cautiously. He needed her to trust him, to open up about her past, and he realized that his initial desperation might have scared her. He couldn't afford to make that mistake again. Michael returned to the small bar in Greenwich Village, arriving early in the evening. The place was less crowded, giving him a chance to speak to Olivia without the noise of a packed room. As she arrived, her eyes flickered with recognition when she spotted him. "You again," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and resignation. Michael nodded, offering a tentative smile. "I know I keep showing up, but I promise I'm not here to make you uncomfortable." Olivia shrugged. setting her guitar case down. "It's a public place. You're allowed to be here." "I was hoping we could talk a bit more," Michael said gently. "About your mother. And about that song." Olivia hesitated, her eyes wary. "Why do you care so much?" Michael chose his words carefully. "Because I think your mother might have been someone I knew. Someone I loved deeply." Olivia's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by the vulnerability in his voice. "You knew her? Caroline?" Michael nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I knew her as Anna." The revelation hung in the air, and for a moment, Olivia seemed to struggle with the implications. "You think my mom was Anna?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I do," Michael replied. "And if I'm right, there are things you deserve to know about her." Olivia's face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. I don't know. This is all so much. I've lived my whole life thinking my mom was just my mom. Caroline Evans." Michael reached out, placing a hand on the table between them. "I understand how overwhelming this must be, Olivia, but I need to find the truth, and I think you do too." There was a long pause, filled with the weight of unspoken emotions. Finally, Olivia nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Okay, but I want to know more about you first. You've been asking all the questions, but I don't know anything about you, Michael Carter." Michael couldn't help but smile at her cautious curiosity. "Fair enough. What would you like to know?" Olivia tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. "Why did you care so much about my mother? What was she to you?" Michael's eyes softened. "She was everything to me. We were in love, planning a future together. Until she disappeared." Olivia looked away, absorbing his words. "So, you never stopped looking for her?" "No," Michael answered, his voice firm. "I never stopped." The raw sincerity in his voice seemed to break through Olivia's defenses. She met his gaze, her own eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a hint of hope. "I'll try to help you," she said slowly, "but I don't know how much I can offer. My memories of my mother are vague." "That's all I ask," Michael replied, grateful for even the smallest chance to uncover the truth. As they parted ways that evening, Michael felt a cautious optimism brewing within him. Olivia's willingness to continue the conversation was a step forward, a small crack in the walls that had kept the past hidden for so long. He knew there would be more obstacles ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. But unknown to both Michael and Olivia, a shadowy figure watched them from a distance, hidden among the dim lights of the bar. The figure's face was obscured, but the intensity in their gaze suggested a dangerous interest in the unfolding reunion. The past, it seemed, was not ready to let go just yet. The night after their conversation, Michael was restless. Olivia's willingness to open up was a victory, but it came with a heavy burden. The possibility that Caroline Evans was indeed Anna. Michael tried to sleep, but the unanswered questions were relentless. Why would Anna have abandoned everything to live as someone else? Why had she never reached out? The next morning, Michael sat in his spacious office overlooking the bustling streets of Manhattan, his mind far from the skyscrapers that symbolized his empire. He received a call from David, who had been tirelessly working behind the scenes. "Sir, I found something that might be relevant," David said, his tone unusually serious. Michael's interest was piqued. "What is it?" "There's an old hospital record from almost 20 years ago under the name Caroline Evans. It lists a childbirth, Olivia's birth, to be precise. But here's the interesting part. There's no mention of a father on the record, just a line reading, 'Father unknown.'" Michael leaned back in his chair, processing the information. It was possible that Anna had cut all ties to keep her daughter safe. "Keep looking," he instructed. "We need more than just hospital records. I need proof, something concrete." That afternoon, Michael received an unexpected message from Olivia. It was a simple text, "Can we meet?" Within the hour, they were sitting in a small cafe in the East Village. It was quieter than the bar, a place where they could speak freely without the noise of a crowd. Olivia looked more composed, but there was an unmistakable tension in her eyes. "I've been thinking about everything you said," she began, stirring her coffee absently. "It's a lot to process, but I can't deny the possibility that you might be right about my mother." Michael nodded, grateful for her honesty. I understand, Olivia. It's a lot to take in. She looked at him, searching his face for answers. If you're right, and Caroline was actually Anna, why do you think she disappeared? Why would she go to such lengths to hide? Michael took a deep breath, unsure how much to reveal. Anna and I were deeply involved in a dangerous world, he admitted. My business dealings back then were more complicated. There were people who wanted to hurt us, and I suspect she might have gone into hiding to protect you. Olivia's expression shifted from confusion to realization. So, you think she did it for me? Michael nodded slowly. It's possible. If she believed there was a threat, she would have done anything to keep you safe. A silence fell between them, heavy with the weight of missed years and lost moments. Olivia seemed lost in thought, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. There's something I want to show you, she said suddenly, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a small, worn notebook, its cover faded and its pages filled with handwritten notes and lyrics. This belonged to my mother, she explained. I found it among her things after she died. It's mostly lyrics and poems, but some of the entries seem more personal. Michael took the notebook gently, flipping through the pages. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, neat, and distinctly Anna's. His heart ached as he read the lyrics, many of them echoing the same themes of love, loss, and sacrifice that had defined their relationship. And then he found it, a name, scrawled hastily in the margin of one page. Michael. His breath caught, and his eyes flicked to Olivia, who was watching him intently. You're in there, she said softly. I don't know what it means, but I thought you should see it. Michael's eyes burned with unshed tears. It was the first tangible proof that Anna had never truly forgotten him, that he had been a part of her life even after she disappeared. Thank you, he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. This means more than you can imagine. Olivia seemed to struggle with her own emotions. I never really understood why my mother was so secretive, why she never talked about her past. I always thought it was because of me, like maybe she blamed me for something. Michael reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It wasn't your fault, Olivia. If she hid the truth, it was to protect you, not because she blamed you. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. I just want to understand, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I want to know who she really was. Michael nodded. We'll figure it out together. I promise. As they left the cafe, a sense of renewed purpose filled Michael. He had a partner in his search for the truth, Olivia, the daughter he never knew Anna had. But he also felt a growing sense of urgency, as if time was running out. Back at his penthouse that evening, Michael sifted through more of the old photographs he had stored away. He came across one that stood out. It was a picture of Anna holding a small baby, her face lit up with a smile that seemed to transcend all the troubles that had surrounded them. Michael stared at the photo, realizing it must have been taken shortly before she disappeared. As he studied the image, a thought struck him, one that sent chills down his spine. Could it be that someone from his past had discovered Anna's secret? Could that be why she had gone into hiding in the first place? The more he considered it, the more it made sense. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was David. Sir, there's something you need to know, David said, his voice tense. I found a connection between Caroline Evans and someone from your past, a man named Richard Sterling. Michael's blood ran cold at the mention of the name. Sterling was a dangerous figure from his old life, a man known for his ruthless tactics and vendettas. Are you sure? Michael asked, his voice low. Yes, sir. Sterling was involved in a case with Caroline about 10 years ago. It seems she tried to file a restraining order against him, but the case was mysteriously dropped. Michael's grip tightened on the phone. Find out everything you can about Sterling's movements. If he's still in New York, I want to know where he is. As he hung up, Michael felt a cold fear settle over him. If Sterling was involved, it meant that Olivia could be in real danger. Michael knew that he needed to act quickly. He couldn't let the past destroy what little hope he had left. The realization that Richard Sterling was part of Anna's hidden past hit Michael like a punch to the gut. Sterling wasn't just an old adversary. He was one of the most ruthless figures in New York's underworld, a man who operated without conscience or restraint. Michael had crossed paths with Sterling during his early days as a rising business mogul, a time when deals were sealed in shadows and risks often came with deadly consequences. If Sterling was truly connected to Caroline Evans, who might be Anna, then the stakes had just become dangerously high. Michael felt the weight of urgency pressing down on him. He couldn't afford to waste any time. The next morning, he arranged a meeting with David in a discreet coffee shop away from his office, hoping to avoid prying eyes. David arrived promptly, his face grim. "I've been digging, sir. Sterling is still in the city, but he's kept a low profile. It's not easy to track his movements." Michael's jaw tightened. "Do we know what his connection was to Caroline?" David hesitated. "It appears that Caroline was living under a different identity when she filed the restraining order. It was only later, during my deeper search, that I linked her to the name Caroline Evans. From what I found, it looks like she was trying to protect Olivia." Michael felt a surge of anger mixed with despair. "So she wasn't just hiding from me," he murmured. "She was hiding from him too?" David nodded solemnly. "It seems that way, sir. I'll keep trying to find more information, but we need to be careful. Sterling is dangerous, and we don't know what he might do if he realizes we're investigating." As Michael left the coffee shop, a plan was already forming in his mind. He needed to confront Olivia about Sterling, despite how difficult the conversation would be. She deserved to know the full extent of the danger they faced, and he needed her help to understand how much she knew about her mother's past. He arranged to meet Olivia in Central Park that afternoon, the place where he had first heard her sing Anna's song. The setting felt both fitting and surreal. When Olivia arrived, Michael could see a mix of curiosity and worry on her face. "You sounded urgent," she said as she approached. "I was," Michael admitted. "There's something I need to tell you, and it's not easy." Olivia's expression shifted to one of concern. "What is it?" Michael took a deep breath. "Do you know the name Richard Sterling?" Olivia frowned, shaking her head slowly. "No, I don't think so. Should I?" "Sterling is a dangerous man," Michael said, choosing his words carefully. "I believe he had some sort of connection to your mother, Caroline. I think she was trying to protect you from him." Olivia's eyes widened, a mix of confusion and fear flashing across her face. "Are you saying my mother was in danger because of this man? Why would she be involved with someone like that?" Michael nodded, his gaze steady. "I don't know all the details yet, but it seems that Anna, your mother, was hiding from him. The restraining order she filed was never enforced. She might have gone into hiding to keep you safe." Olivia seemed to struggle to absorb the information. "This is all too much," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never imagined my mother's life was like this. So complicated, so dangerous." Michael reached out, touching her arm gently. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I never wanted you to be caught up in something like this. But we need to be careful now, especially if Sterling is still around." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes filled with determination despite the fear. "What do we do next?" Michael admired her courage. "First, we need to make sure you're safe. I have people who can watch over you, just to be sure. But we also need to find out more about your mother's connection to Sterling. Anything you can remember, any details, could help." Olivia nodded slowly. "There are a few things in my mother's old belongings that I haven't gone through in detail. Maybe there's something there that could give us a clue." Michael's heart lifted with a glimmer of hope. "That's a start. Let's go through it together." That evening, they met at Olivia's small apartment in Brooklyn. It was modest, but filled with warmth. Photos of her mother lined the walls, along with posters of artists that had inspired Olivia's music career. In the center of the living room was a large cardboard box, filled with old notebooks, photos, and keepsakes. Olivia knelt beside the box, carefully lifting items out one by one. Michael joined her, his eyes scanning each item with a mix of hope and trepidation. They found old school reports, birthday cards, and faded photographs of Olivia as a child, always with Caroline nearby. "Here," Olivia said suddenly, pulling out a small stack of letters tied together with twine. "These were in my mother's things. I never really read them before." Michael carefully untied the bundle, unfolding the first letter. The handwriting was familiar. It was Anna's. His hands trembled slightly as he began to read. "To my dearest Olivia, *, if you're reading this, It means you're looking for answers. I wish I could have told you everything in person, but I had to make choices to protect you. There are people in this world who would have hurt us both if they had known where we were. I did everything for you, Olivia, and I hope one day you'll understand why I had to leave the life I once knew behind. Asterisk. Tears welled up in Michael's eyes. This was the confirmation he had needed. Anna had written these letters to Olivia, hoping that one day she would seek the truth. Olivia looked at him, her own eyes glistening with tears. So she really was hiding from something. Or someone. Michael nodded, his voice filled with emotion. She was trying to protect you, Olivia. She sacrificed everything for your safety. As they sifted through more letters, they found cryptic references to someone Anna called the Dark Man, a figure who seemed to be stalking her dreams and her reality. It was clear that Anna had lived in constant fear, always looking over her shoulder. But then Michael found a final letter, tucked at the bottom of the pile. It was different from the others, shorter, more urgent. Asterisk. If Richard finds me, it will be over. Protect Olivia at all costs. Asterisk. Michael's hands tightened around the paper. We need to act now, he said firmly. If Sterling knows about you, Olivia, you could be in real danger. Olivia's face paled, but she stood straighter, her voice steady. I'm not going to run, Michael. If my mother faced this for me, then I'll face it too. Michael felt a surge of pride mixed with fear for her safety. We'll do it together, he promised. But we need to be smart. Sterling isn't just anyone. He's a man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. As they left Olivia's apartment that night, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the street but saw nothing unusual. Still, the sense of foreboding lingered. Back in his car, Michael made a call to David. We need full surveillance on Olivia, he ordered, and find Sterling, wherever he is. We need to bring this to an end before it's too late. The battle with the past was far from over, but Michael was no longer alone. Now, he had Olivia by his side, and he was determined to protect her the way Anna had once tried to protect them both. The morning sun struggled to pierce through a blanket of gray clouds as Michael stood on the balcony of his penthouse, staring blankly at the city below. The chill in the air mirrored the unease settling deep within him. After reading Anna's final letter, he knew there was no more time to waste. Richard Sterling had to be found before he could strike again. Olivia's safety was now Michael's singular focus. Down in Brooklyn, Olivia prepared herself for another difficult day. She had barely slept, her thoughts consumed by the revelations about her mother and the looming threat of Sterling. Despite the fear, there was also a spark of determination within her. She wasn't a child anymore, and if her mother had sacrificed so much to protect her, Olivia would honor that sacrifice by finding the truth. Michael had arranged for a private security detail to follow Olivia discreetly. As she left her apartment, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. For a moment, her heart raced, thinking it could be Sterling's men. But then she recognized one of the security guards Michael had introduced her to the night before. Relieved but still anxious, she made her way to a nearby coffee shop where she was supposed to meet Michael. When he arrived, he looked tired but resolute. How are you holding up? He asked, his voice softer than usual. Olivia managed a weak smile. I'm okay. Just trying to make sense of all this. Michael nodded, understanding her struggle all too well. I've made progress on finding Sterling, he said quietly, leaning closer across the table. My contacts say he's operating out of a warehouse in the Bronx. It's heavily guarded, but it's the best lead we've got. Olivia's eyes widened. You're going to confront him, aren't you? Michael hesitated before answering. Yes, I have to, Olivia. He's the key to understanding why your mother disappeared. And he's the only one who can end this threat. Fear flickered across Olivia's face, but she quickly masked it with a determined expression. I want to come with you. Michael shook his head firmly. No, it's too dangerous. I can't let you get involved in this part of the fight. Olivia's voice was steady but insistent. I know the risks, Michael, but I can't just sit back and do nothing while you put yourself in harm's way. He could see the fire in her eyes, the same fierce resolve that had defined Anna. It was both inspiring and terrifying. This isn't just about me, he said slowly. If something happens to you, I can't let that happen. Olivia leaned forward, her voice low but strong. My mother didn't raise me to be afraid, Michael. If this is how I can understand what she went through, then I have to be there. Michael finally relented, though every instinct screamed against it. All right, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. But you stay close to me, and if things go wrong, you get out. No hesitation. Later that evening, Michael and Olivia found themselves in the back of a black sedan, heading toward the warehouse in the Bronx. The city's streets were bathed in shadows, the headlights cutting through the darkness like blades. Beside Michael sat David, who had insisted on joining them. He had arranged backup, but they were to remain hidden unless things escalated. This is it, David said quietly as they approached a desolate part of the neighborhood. The warehouse loomed ahead, an ominous silhouette against the dim lights of the street lamps. Michael turned to Olivia. Stay close, he reminded her. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. The three of them stepped out of the car, approaching the warehouse cautiously. Michael signaled to David, who motioned for their backup team to fan out and cover the exits. They moved quietly, the silence almost deafening in the cold night air. Inside the warehouse, the sound of metal clanging and muffled voices reached them. Michael pushed open the door, revealing a cavernous space filled with crates, machinery, and a few scattered figures. At the far end of the room, a man stood with his back to them, talking to someone on the phone. Michael's heart pounded as he recognized him instantly. It was Richard Sterling. Sterling turned slowly, his eyes narrowing when he saw Michael. A twisted smile spread across his face. "Michael Carter," he said, his voice dripping with mock surprise. "I never thought I'd see you again." Michael stepped forward, his voice cold. "It's over, Sterling. Whatever you're planning, it ends now." Sterling's smile widened, his gaze shifting briefly to Olivia. "So, this is the girl," he mused. "Anna's precious daughter. She looks just like her." Michael clenched his fists, fury burning within him. "Stay away from her, Sterling." Sterling laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Anna always thought she could outsmart me," he said, his tone turning dark. "But in the end, she was just another pawn in a game she didn't understand." Olivia stepped forward, her voice surprisingly strong. "Why did you want her dead? What did she ever do to you?" Sterling's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and amusement. "Your mother tried to expose me," he sneered. "She thought she could bring me down, using Carter here as her shield. But she underestimated how far I'd go to protect my interests." Michael felt a surge of guilt mixed with rage. "This is between you and me, Sterling. Let Olivia go." Sterling raised an eyebrow, seemingly amused by Michael's desperation. "Always the hero, aren't you, Michael? But this isn't a fairy tale. It's business, and sometimes business gets ugly." Before anyone could react, Sterling pulled a gun from his jacket. The suddenness of the movement made Olivia gasp, but Michael instinctively stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. "Don't be stupid, Sterling," Michael warned, his voice low and steady. "If you shoot, you won't make it out of here alive." Sterling's eyes flickered with uncertainty, a hint of doubt creeping into his expression. But the standoff was tense, and Michael knew one wrong move could be fatal. David, who had been edging closer, suddenly lunged at Sterling, knocking the gun from his hand. The weapon clattered to the floor, and chaos erupted. Michael grabbed Olivia's arm, pulling her toward the exit as David grappled with Sterling. "Go," Michael shouted. "Get out of here." Olivia hesitated, torn between fear and loyalty, but then she followed Michael's lead, running toward the nearest door. As they burst through it and into the cold night air, Michael turned to make sure she was safe. Behind them, the sounds of a struggle continued, but Michael's focus was solely on getting Olivia out of harm's way. Once they reached the car, Michael pushed Olivia inside, slamming the door shut behind her. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'm going back for David." But Olivia grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "No, you can't go back in there." Michael shook his head. "I have to. He's my friend." Before Olivia could protest further, Michael was already running back toward the warehouse. Inside, he found David locked in a fierce struggle with Sterling, who had managed to retrieve a knife from his boot. Michael rushed forward, grabbing Sterling's arm and twisting it back. The knife fell to the ground, and David quickly subdued him, securing his hands behind his back. "It's over," Michael said, breathing heavily. "You lost." Sterling glared up at him, his face twisted with hatred. "You think this ends here, Carter? You'll never be free of me." But Michael wasn't listening. He and David dragged Sterling out of the warehouse, where the backup team took him into custody. Outside, Olivia stood by the car, her face a mixture of relief and lingering fear. When she saw Michael emerge, she ran to him, her voice breaking. "Are you okay?" Michael nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's over, Olivia. He can't hurt us anymore." As they stood there, holding on to each other in the cold darkness, Michael felt the weight of the past lift just a little. The danger had not entirely disappeared, but for the first time, there was a sense of closure. They had faced the shadows together, and that made all the difference. Days passed since Sterling's arrest, and the city seemed to exhale a sigh of relief along with Michael and Olivia. With Sterling in custody and facing multiple charges, the immediate threat had been neutralized, at least for now. Michael felt a cautious sense of victory, but there was also a lingering emptiness. He still didn't have the full truth about Anna's disappearance. Michael was now focused on helping Olivia understand the parts of her mother's life that had been hidden. The pieces of Anna's past were beginning to fit together, but there were still missing elements. Who was Anna beyond her role as a mother, as Caroline Evans? What had she endured alone? One morning, Olivia received a call from an unknown number. She answered hesitantly, her voice wary. "Hello?" A familiar voice responded, tinged with an urgency she hadn't heard before. "Olivia? It's Richard Sterling." Olivia's heart stopped, her body going cold. "How are you calling me?" "Don't hang up," Sterling urged, his voice hoarse. "I'm not calling to threaten you. There are things you need to know, things about your mother that no one else will tell you." Olivia's hand trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "Why should I believe anything you say?" Sterling's voice softened, carrying an unexpected tone of regret. "Because I owe it to her, and to you. I loved your mother once, long before she became Caroline Evans." The words hit Olivia like a shockwave. She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "What do you mean you loved her? You were trying to hurt her." Sterling sighed deeply, a sound filled with weariness. "It wasn't always like this, Olivia. Your mother and I were involved a long time ago, back when she was still Anna. But when she chose to be with Michael, things changed. I couldn't let go, and that's when it got ugly." Olivia felt a mix of disbelief and anger. "She left you for a reason, Sterling. You destroyed everything she tried to build." "Yes," Sterling admitted, his voice heavy. "I did. But it's important you understand why she disappeared. It wasn't just me she was running from. It was something bigger." "Bigger?" Olivia echoed, confusion creeping into her voice. "Michael's world is dangerous," Sterling continued. "There were forces beyond me that wanted Anna gone. She thought she could protect you by keeping you away from everyone, including Michael." Tears stung Olivia's eyes as she struggled to comprehend Sterling's words. "And you let her live in fear all those years?" Sterling's voice broke. "I know you won't forgive me, and I don't expect you to. But you deserve to know that Anna's choices weren't just about fear. They were about love. She loved you more than anything, Olivia. That's why she did what she did." Before Olivia could respond, the line went dead. She stared at her phone, unsure whether to be relieved or devastated. The conversation felt surreal, a final twist in a story that had already been filled with too many betrayals. Later that day, she met Michael at his penthouse, her expression clouded with uncertainty. Michael could tell immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked. "I got a call from Sterling," Olivia confessed, her voice shaky. Michael's face darkened. "What did he want?" Olivia recounted the conversation, every word laced with lingering disbelief. Michael listened intently, his eyes narrowing at the mention of larger forces. When Olivia finished, he sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "He's not wrong," Michael said reluctantly. "There were powerful people who wanted to see Anna disappear. I tried to protect her, but she was always one step ahead, always thinking of how to protect you." Olivia's eyes brimmed with tears. I don't know who my mother really was, Michael. I thought I did, but now I'm not sure of anything. Michael approached her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I don't think anyone truly knew Anna. She kept parts of herself hidden, even from those she loved the most. As the days passed, Olivia began sorting through more of her mother's belongings, hoping to find something, anything, that would provide clarity. Michael often joined her, sharing stories of the Anna he had loved. They laughed at the happier memories and mourned the lost moments that could never be reclaimed. Then one afternoon, Olivia found a small, locked wooden box buried beneath a stack of old clothes in the back of her closet. It was heavy, worn with age, and she had never seen it before. She called Michael over immediately. When he arrived, Olivia handed him the box. I don't have a key for it, she said. Michael examined the box carefully before deciding to force the lock open with a small tool. The lock gave way with a soft click, and the lid creaked as it opened. Inside, they found a bundle of letters, neatly tied with a red ribbon. Each envelope was addressed to Olivia, but none had been sent. Michael handed the letters to Olivia, his voice soft. These are for you. Olivia hesitated, then untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. It was dated 2 months before Anna's death. My dearest Olivia, I wish I could have been there for you in the ways you deserved. I wish I could have told you everything face to face. But if you're reading this, it means you've found the truth, or at least some of it. You may never understand all my choices, but I hope you know that every decision I made was out of love for you, *. Olivia's tears flowed freely as she read. Each letter contained pieces of Anna's hidden story, the fears she lived with, the choices she made to keep Olivia safe, and the deep love that had driven every sacrifice. Michael sat beside her, silent but supportive, his own eyes misty with the weight of lost love. As Olivia read the final letter, she found one last message that seemed to be directed at both of them. *, if Michael is with you now, tell him I never stopped loving him. He was my greatest love, and I hope he finds peace in knowing that I did what I had to for our daughter *. Michael's breath hitched, his throat tight with emotion. I never stopped loving her either, he whispered, his voice raw. Olivia reached out, taking his hand. We have to let her go now, Michael. We have to move forward. Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. Yes, we do. That evening, they stood together on the balcony of Michael's penthouse, watching the sun set over the city. The air was crisp, and the sky was streaked with the warm colors of dusk. It was a moment of bittersweet closure, an acknowledgement of the past and a quiet promise of the future. Olivia turned to Michael, her voice filled with newfound resolve. She wanted us to be a family, Michael. It's not too late. Michael looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and vulnerability. You're right, he said softly. It's not too late. For the first time in years, Michael felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had lost Anna, but he had found Olivia, and in her, he found a part of Anna that could never be lost. The ghosts of the past had not vanished, but they had been faced, understood, and, finally, accepted. And as the city's lights began to twinkle in the growing darkness, Michael and Olivia stood side by side, ready to write a new chapter together. The early morning air was crisp as Michael prepared for what he hoped would be a defining moment. Sterling's arrest had quelled some of the immediate dangers, but Michael knew that the deeper shadows of his past were not entirely gone. He had built his empire on a foundation that wasn't entirely clean, and there were still unanswered questions lingering about Anna's final years. Michael had been contacted by someone claiming to know more about Anna's disappearance, a mysterious source who had reached out anonymously, offering to meet in person to reveal the final pieces of the puzzle. Despite the risks, Michael felt compelled to go. He couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting could provide the closure both he and Olivia needed. He had been upfront with Olivia about the meeting, urging her to stay behind for her own safety. This could be a trap, he warned. I don't want you anywhere near it. Olivia, however, was determined not to let him face it alone. I'm coming, she insisted, her voice unwavering. If this is about my mother, then I need to be there. Michael knew there was no convincing her otherwise. He reluctantly agreed, with the condition that she would stay hidden and let him handle the situation. If anything feels off, you run, he said, his voice laced with urgency. Olivia nodded, her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. The meeting was set for an abandoned dock on the outskirts of Brooklyn, a place that seemed straight out of a crime novel. As Michael and Olivia approached, the fog hung low over the water, and the wooden planks creaked under their steps. The area was desolate, the kind of place where secrets came to die. They saw a lone figure standing near the edge of the dock, backlit by the faint glow of the rising sun. Michael recognized him immediately. It was Sterling, somehow out of custody. His presence wasn't just unexpected. It was a bad omen. Olivia's eyes widened in shock. How is he here? I thought he was locked up. Michael's mind raced, piecing together the implications. Sterling must have used his connections to secure a temporary release. Or worse, this was all part of a plan to draw them out. Sterling's face broke into a sly grin as Michael and Olivia approached. I see you brought her, he remarked, his tone casual but menacing. Michael stepped forward, shielding Olivia with his body. What do you want, Sterling? Haven't you done enough damage? Sterling's expression shifted from amusement to something colder, more calculating. This was never just about Anna or you, Michael. It's about power, control, and finishing what I started. Michael's voice was low and dangerous. What is it you think you'll gain here? Sterling let out a slow, chilling laugh. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about gaining. It's about making sure you lose everything that ever mattered to you. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound emerged from behind them. Michael turned just in time to see two men, armed and looming, approaching from the shadows. He quickly reached for his phone, signaling their backup team, but he knew they were on their own for the moment. Sterling's voice was calm, almost mocking. You see, Michael, I don't need to kill you. I just need you to suffer. Watching her get hurt would be enough. Olivia's face was pale but defiant. I'm not afraid of you, she spat, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Sterling's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer. You should be, he said quietly. Before he could make another move, Michael lunged forward, his anger overriding all sense of self-preservation. He managed to tackle Sterling to the ground, but the two armed men rushed forward, grabbing Michael and pulling him off. Olivia, refusing to stay hidden, stepped forward with a defiant stance. Let him go, she shouted. Sterling, now on his feet again, looked at Olivia with a mix of disdain and admiration. You've got spirit, just like your mother, he said. But spirit won't save you. Michael struggled against the men's grip, desperation clear in his voice. Olivia, run. Get out of here. But Olivia didn't move. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on Sterling's. You can't win, Richard, she said, her voice surprisingly calm. My mother's gone, but I'm still here. And I won't be afraid of you. Sterling's smile was cold and cruel. Brave words, but meaningless. Suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the air. Michael's backup had arrived, their flashing lights visible in the distance. The two armed men hesitated, their focus broken by the approaching police cars. Michael seized the opportunity, breaking free from their grip and knocking one of them to the ground. Sterling, realizing he was outnumbered, turned to flee, but Michael grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against a nearby post. It's over, Sterling, Michael said through gritted teeth. You won't hurt anyone else. Sterling glared at Michael, his eyes filled with a venomous mix of rage and desperation. You think this ends here, Carter? It never ends. The police arrived moments later, quickly apprehending Sterling and his accomplices. As they were led away in handcuffs, Sterling turned to Olivia one last time. You can't run from who you are, he called out. Your mother tried, and look where it got her. Olivia's face was set, her expression unyielding. I'm not running, she said firmly. Not anymore. With Sterling finally gone, Michael turned to Olivia, his face etched with relief and lingering fear. Are you okay? Olivia nodded, her eyes filled with both tears and a fierce resolve. I am, and so are you. As they walked back to the car, the weight of the encounter began to sink in. The danger that had loomed over them for so long was now truly over, but the emotional scars remained. Later that evening, Back at Michael's penthouse, they sat together in silence, processing everything that had transpired. The city's lights twinkled outside the window, a stark contrast to the dark events of the day. "I think I finally understand her," Olivia said quietly, breaking the silence. "My mother did everything she could to protect me, even if it meant losing everything." Michael's eyes were filled with a mix of pride and sadness. "She was the bravest person I ever knew," he said. "And now I see that same bravery in you." Olivia looked at him, her gaze steady and filled with a new sense of peace. "Thank you, Michael, for everything." Michael took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We're a family now, Olivia. It's what Anna wanted, and it's what we're going to be." For the first time in what felt like forever, they both felt a sense of closure. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, not perfectly, but as much as was possible. They had faced the darkness together, and now they stood in the light of a new beginning. The city outside was still buzzing with life, but inside there was a quiet calm. A calm that promised healing, hope, and the chance to rebuild everything that had been lost. Weeks passed since the final confrontation with Sterling, and Michael and Olivia tried to find their footing in a world that no longer felt haunted by threats or unanswered questions. The days were slow and unremarkable, filled with mundane routines that both welcomed and unsettled them. It was strange how ordinary life could feel after so much chaos. Olivia moved in temporarily with Michael, his penthouse now serving as a refuge instead of a battlefield. Her presence brought a lightness to the space that had been missing for years. She filled the rooms with music, often playing her guitar by the large window that overlooked the city. It was the same song Anna used to sing, but it no longer felt haunted. It felt more like a tribute, a way to keep Anna's memory alive. One evening, as Olivia was strumming gently, she paused and looked over at Michael, who was lost in thought on the couch. "What was she like, really?" she asked suddenly. Michael glanced up, his eyes softening. "She was extraordinary, strong, stubborn, and brave in ways that both inspired and terrified me." Olivia smiled faintly, her fingers idly plucking the strings. "I wish I'd known her the way you did." Michael leaned forward, his voice filled with sincerity. "But you do know her, Olivia. You're more like her than you realize. The way you fought, the way you stood your ground. It's all Anna." Olivia nodded, her eyes moistening slightly. "I just wish I could have told her that I understood, that I wasn't angry." Michael felt a pang of guilt. "We all have regrets, Olivia. But I think, in her own way, Anna knew that you would understand someday." The words hung in the air, a mix of acceptance and lingering sadness. They had lost Anna, but they hadn't lost everything. They had each other, and that was something worth building upon. The following morning, Michael received an unexpected call from his lawyer. "Michael, I found something in Anna's old estate papers," the lawyer said, his voice tinged with urgency. "It's a letter addressed to you." Michael's heart raced. "A letter? How is that possible?" The lawyer hesitated before replying. "It appears Anna wrote it years ago, but it was sealed away until now. You should come by and see it." Later that day, Michael held the envelope in his hands, his heart heavy with anticipation. He returned to the penthouse, where Olivia waited anxiously. "What's that?" she asked, noticing the envelope. "It's from Anna," Michael said quietly. "It was part of her estate, meant for me." Olivia's eyes widened, a mix of curiosity and emotion. "Are you going to open it?" Michael nodded, slowly tearing the envelope open. The letter inside was written in Anna's familiar handwriting, and Michael's eyes blurred as he began to read aloud. "My dearest Michael, asterisk if you're reading this, it means you found your way back to Olivia. I always hoped that would happen. I'm sorry for everything, the lies, the secrets, and the pain I caused by leaving. But I had to protect her, and I had to protect you. There were forces beyond our control, forces that threatened to destroy everything we built together, asterisk. Asterisk, I want you to know that my love for you never wavered, not for a single moment. You were my greatest love, and I wish things could have been different. But if there's one thing I ask of you now, it's to take care of Olivia. She's strong, but she'll need you, just as much as you need her, asterisk. Asterisk, find peace, Michael, not just for yourself, but for the family we dreamed of." I believe you can, and I hope you and Olivia can start anew, free from the shadows of the past, asterisk. All my love, forever, Anna. Michael's voice broke as he finished the letter, tears slipping down his cheeks. He looked up at Olivia, who was openly crying now. She really never stopped loving you, Olivia whispered. Michael nodded, his voice choked with emotion. And she never stopped loving you either. She wanted us to have this chance, Olivia. For the first time, Michael felt a sense of closure that he hadn't believed possible. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't painless, but it was real. It was a goodbye that had taken years to reach them, but it had arrived at the right moment. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Olivia began to build a new life, one that honored Anna's memory while also embracing their own futures. Olivia continued her music career, but now with a deeper sense of purpose. Her songs were no longer just expressions of pain. They were stories of resilience, of love found and lost, and of second chances. Michael, too, found a new sense of purpose. He reevaluated his empire, deciding to focus more on philanthropy, especially causes related to children and families in need. It was a way to give back, to create something meaningful out of the darkness that had once consumed his life. One sunny afternoon, Michael and Olivia visited Anna's grave together for the first time. It was a quiet, serene place on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by trees that rustled gently in the breeze. Michael placed a bouquet of white lilies on the grave, while Olivia sat beside him, playing Anna's song softly on her guitar. As the last notes faded, Michael spoke softly, his voice filled with both sadness and gratitude. "We're here, Anna. We made it just like you wanted." Olivia touched the gravestone gently, her fingers tracing the engraved name. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the cemetery. It was a moment of profound peace, a peace that Michael and Olivia had fought so hard to achieve. The shadows of the past had finally given way to the light of a new beginning. As they left the cemetery, Michael and Olivia walked side by side, a silent understanding between them. They had been through the fire, but they had come out stronger, bound not just by blood, but by the love of a woman who had sacrificed everything for them. And as they stepped back into the bustling city, they both knew one thing for certain. The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning.